Very good, very nice. And we are live. I want to make sure the live stream is sounds good. Just gonna keep talking so that whenever I see it, I can make sure it sounds right. Head over to live. Gotta wait for it to update. It says I'm live. Ah, here it is. Let's see here. There it is, live. There it is, live. Perfect. Sounds great. I'll pause the thing. Sounds great. Perfect. We'll continue this for maybe an hour or two. We'll see. But this looks pretty good so far. Live. Very good. We'll go ahead and start that over. Close that of the. Actually, I probably should. In case I want to communicate with chat. Weird that the chat just doesn't work sometimes. Not sure how to fix that, honestly. Doing the sign in the chat button just does what? Oh, it just opens up the live chat itself. Oh, that works. That works perfect. And we should be getting a... Oh, I see. Hold on. That was the problem. So the alert box, or the chat box wasn't working because it wasn't at the top. There. Now it's fixed. That would explain why I was having issues last night where it wasn't showing up on the stream. Perfect. Well, I'm going to continue where I left off as we got derailed pretty hard and started talking about D&D and a bunch of other stuff. So we left off at Souls Experience leveling, and we were getting ready to head to the adventuring side. So we were talking about the leveling, specifically spending souls, and we even mentioned how... Hold on, where's my water? I have obtained thine water. Sweet. So, just tighten this real quick. I think that tightens that. So what do we got going on here? Oh yeah, that's right. So we left off talking about the banking. I don't do banking on the leveling. And that was... that if you reset a bonfire, you could just put souls into your level without actually leveling up. I'm not going to use that. High risk, high reward is how it should be played out. Let's see. So adventuring. Let's see what we got going on here. See if we can bring my mic out a little bit farther. There we go. In situations, let's see. So time, movement, speed. In situations where it's important to keep track of the passage of time, the GM determines how long a task requires. The GM might use a different time scale depending on the context of the situation at hand. In a dungeon environment, the adventurer's movement happens at a scale of minutes. It takes about minutes to creep down a long hallway, another minute to check for traps on the door at the end of the hall. Of course, in a city, a scale of hours is often more appropriate. For long journeys, a scale of days. In combat, other fast-paced situations, the game relies on rounds, a 6-second span of time, of course. You have different types of movements, and these are more just the rules itself of how you should DM, or GM, if you will. Let's see, every character and monster has a speed, which in distance and feet is a distance in feet the character or monster can walk in one round. This number assumes short bursts of energetic movement amidst a life-threatening situation. Every character has a 30-foot speed. The rule opposite determines how far a character or monster can move in a minute, an hour, or a day. And you've got travel pace, forced march, difficult terrains, mounts and vehicles. And then there's the travel pace. So at fast pace, you can move 400 feet in a minute, 4 miles in an hour, 30 miles in a day, with a -5 penalty to passive wisdom perception scores. At normal pace, 300 feet, 3 miles, or 24 miles. And at a slow pace, 200 feet, 2 miles, 18 miles, but you have the ability to use stealth at a slow pace. And again, that's just some normal core rules to go over. Let's look at special types of movement. Climbing, swimming, crawling, jumping. When you make a long jump, you cover up to your strength score in feet if you move at least 10 feet on foot immediately before the jump. When you make a standing long jump, you can leap only half that distance. Either way, each foot you clear on the jump costs 1 feet of movement. A high jump, you can leap 3 feet plus your strength modifier if you move at least 10 feet on your foot immediately before the jump. You can extend your arms to half your height above yourself during your jump, thus you can reach above your distance. Again, some normal rules. Environments, falling, vision of light, suffocating, blind sight, true sight, dark vision. Standard rules, nothing too different here. I think some of this might have some interesting stuff in here, so let's look at this real quick. So, objects, characters' interaction with objects, environments, simple to resolve in the game. It's nothing too different. An object's armor class is measured how difficult it is to deal damage to it. There's of course the breaking the damage thresholds, its hit points, just basic rules on the objects. You know, here's a great example. Cloth and paper and rope has an AC of 11, which for some of that doesn't make any sense, like paper, unless it's really thick paper. But you know, a bunch of other stuff has an AC that you have to hit, and then you can deal damage based on whether it's fragile, it's a resilient item. Resting, death, and respawns. And once again, this is just some normal D&D rules. We can skip right over that. Now here is where it's going to get interesting, because the whole point of Dark Souls is, you know, well, maybe not the entire point, but the whole point of playing a Dark Souls game is to expect to die, and the same should be said for the D&D. So here is the respawning page. Let's say respawning page. So let's make my mic a little closer. I kind of need a little bit of light. Hopefully this doesn't cause a glare. It causes a glare right here, unfortunately. Something like this for now. And maybe turn that light down. I just ordered a new camera and a new stand, so you won't have the wobbly camera, and you'll actually be able to read. That will arrive, I think, Monday or Tuesday, I think is when they're coming. So later next week I'll be able to do these for D&D. If we have any camera purposes, it will be the same camera. Luckily, you're not trying to read anything during the D&D campaign, so that should be about normal. Let's see here. As noted previously, when a character dies, they respawn at the nearest bonfire. They lose all collected souls, but are otherwise returned to full position, and all their abilities are ready to use once again. When a player character respawns, my brain stopped working. When a player character respawns is up to them. Oh, when they respawn is up to them is what it's saying. I just had to read the whole thing. Though they cannot rejoin the battle that killed them if it continues. It will state that when I was DMing, the bonfire was right next to a bunch of encounters, so I allowed the player to come back to the fight with no repercussions. Normally, you would have to assume that the bonfire is out, away from the encounter, meaning they won't be able to join for the encounter until the encounter is completed, whether by a TBK or fleeing, or the party defeats the encounter, right? In this case, if a player character wishes to rejoin a battle after dying and respawning, the creature they are engaged with regain all position, though the character and their allies do not. And if we look at the, for anyone who's played Elden Ring and knows of the seamless co-op mod, it's kind of evident there that the only thing is when a player dies, it doesn't respawn the position. They are just able to come back to the fight, but nothing really changes other than they come back to the fight and they regain less souls. However, if another player in the seamless co-op decides to rest, it respawns all the enemies in their current position. And so it would make that really confusing, so I would like to say that if, a player dies, they're just out of the combat. And unless they're right next to the bonfire and they're able to join back, it really wouldn't make much sense for them to respawn all the enemies right in front of your face while you're standing there. So I think the best way to explain it is if a player goes down in combat, they're just out and they're done. And of course, it's always up to the DM to decide on what rules they want to apply here. And so I'm not saying this is how you should, this is kind of what I'm thinking, is that if a player is dead, they're dead, and they're out of that combat. Now, if it's like the beginning of the combat, obviously the players can flee to bring back their party member. Although, when it comes to respawning, I feel the player should rest at the bonfire to bring the player back. Another thing you could do is when a player gets revived at the bonfire, you force them to come back with only 1 HP. So they could come back to the fight if it's relatively close and nothing will change other than they're at one position. And then they would just roll their temporary position again. Or you can make it so they don't get temporary position when coming back into the fight. And that's a good way to allow people to still be able to play the game after dying in a combat, especially if they died really early on. So for respawning mechanics, obviously you can force a rest. Come back with only base position, and gain no temp position. So come back with only base position and gain no temp position when entering fight, or I should say re-entering fight. there's also restarts and counter. And those could be the changes to the rules. I do like the idea of, if it's relatively close and the player can come back, allowing the player to just come back into the fight, but they only gain their they only get their base position. They don't get their spells back. They don't get their flasks back. Nothing. They just come back with just their base position at max again, and that's it. So for people who have really low position, I mean, that could be really bad, especially since when spending position, you're spending your health pool at that point. And so I feel like it can really add that high risk, high reward, because you have a possibility of getting one-shotted by a lot of things, while also still being able to come back and deal an extra turn worth of damage. And we'll even jot that down and make sure that I'm aware of that, so... I'm gonna put my choice in here is come back at full position. So if you die, you would spend one turn come back at full position, no long rest. Let's see here. So, come back at full position with no long rest. And that's probably what I should have just wrote. With no long rest effect. Probably would have made more sense there. God, this pen is so cool. Being able to erase. It's so cool. Full position. With no long rest. My choice is come back at full position with no long rest. Takes... Wow, I could have wrote that case so much better. Takes one turn per encounter. To return. And what I mean by that is if you guys are 3 encounters in, it would take one turn to get to the next encounter, another turn to get to the next encounter, and then your third turn you'd be back at the encounter. And that would help prevent, the player from just being able to come right back over and over after every time they die. Now, of course, we're going to get to the part of why dying is not so great and why that's a high risk, high reward. So, we'll start talking about the next. Hit the space bar on something. I hope I don't miss anything again. Oh, I did. So, let's go over. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm not clicking on anything. Let's go over this next bar, or this next block of text. So, they may, however, explore separately from their main party until the fight is completed, or alternatively, simply wait at the bonfire, which is perfectly fine. Whenever a player character is killed and respawns, a part of them dies or is lost. Memories of their past selves fade, or... Sorry. My eyes are struggling. Memories of their past selves fade, to be replaced only by emptiness. The unkindled do not die, but they do diminish. When a player character respawns, they must succeed a DC 18 Wisdom save, or should they fail, they must roll on a Hollowing effect table. That's one thing I don't do. I do not do the DC because I think if a player dies, they deserve to just take that Hollowing effect. And again, you can use that rule. I'm just choosing not to because... and here's why. I don't use this rule. Now, the reason why you should use the DC 18 Wisdom save rule is for the simple fact that these hollowing effects are permanent. I've set up my game to where you can reverse these. And if anyone remembers Dark Souls 2, I don't remember if it does it in 1, but in Dark Souls 2, every time you die, you lose a chunk of your health. Same thing in my campaign, the way I run the game. And more unfortunately is every time you lose a chunk of health, you gain that piece of hollow. Well, those effects of hollowing is what will is what caps your health. So you have to find or buy humanity and spend the humanity at the bonfire to remove the most recent point of hollowing that you've been afflicted with to reverse your hollowing effects. This does mean that it's one humanity per hollowing effect, and I will say that you are able to accumulate more humanity than your HP can be diminished. So let me look up the rule on death health thingy. I'm trying to find the wiki that helps me with this. I forgot how it works. I forgot how I actually Googled it. How does dying in Dark Souls 2 affect max health? So each time you die in Dark Souls 2, a portion of your overall health bar gets taken away with a maximum penalty of 50%. This is called being hollowed. Every death brings you farther from the full scope of your humanity. And it just kind of goes on. Now, I don't remember how much it actually takes every time. Let me see here. But I did have this system kind of set up in mind. I found the actual wiki that told you exactly how much health you lose. Maybe I just searched up how much max health do you lose every death in Dark Souls 2. And then I got the wiki on that. Kind of weird that I'm not getting the Dark Souls wiki. I usually do anytime I look up Dark Souls stuff, so this is really weird. I'm not gonna lie. Getting recommended these people. Your maximum HP will diminish by 5% every time you die until it caps out at 50%. So you can effectively die, what is that, 10 times? And then it'll cap you out at 50%. And we'll go ahead and write that down in here while we're talking about the hollowing table. So, and this is why the hollowing DC is important, because these are permanent. However, the way I run this campaign, because again, this book is a tool, use it as a tool. I make it so these are not permanent. Now, some of these are good. For example, right here, on a natural 20, Miracle of the Grave. Perhaps you are less than you once were, but this time, upon returning to life, you feel alive. Gain +2 to any single attribute. And so, that's a good one. However, you're going to be losing your max health, and then because you're missing max health, you also, obviously your base position won't matter if you can just roll your temporary position in combat. So that's whenever you force the player to also take a penalty to their temporary position as well. And an easy way to do it, I mean, if somebody had a D10, that's really easy, but some of the other hit dice are different. So the way you'd have to do it is let them roll their temporary position and then remove it by how much hollowing effect they have. Trying to think of off the top of my head how that could be really easy to simplify. in D&D terms, so you're not trying to do a percentage on it. But you'd have to look at D6, D8, and D10, because I do not think there's actually a D12 hit dice in this game. Because the Brute has a D10. Here it is. So the Brute has a D10, D8, D8, and D6. And if you're missing 5% of each of your health pool per death, I think the way I did it is you would just lose... Now, see, that doesn't make any sense. It could have been just 1 point until you're at half. Or even a hit dice until you're at half. So at level 1, your health wouldn't even really go down. At level 2, your health would go down to 1 hit dice. So that's an easy way to simplify it. And then at level 3, it would go down 1, and then it would go down again, because half of 3 is 1.5, and it's not a full number, so you can allow it to go farther down if you want, or you can let it stay higher. And then at level 4, you can only move down as many hit dice as 2. The only thing is whenever you level up in this game, the way it works is at level 1, you start with the max hit dice value, and then it's your level plus your Constitution modifier. Every level after that is just your Con modifier, but as we mentioned before, for us it's your level, so it would just be 1 again, and then your Con modifier. Your level increase, I should say. So you would just put 1 plus Con modifier to a minimum of 1. And so how do you transfer that to, I have 13 health at level 3, for example. Well, that's a great question. How would you do that? Or it would be 12 HP at level 3. So at that point, you'd probably just have to use percentage or find another way to make it even more simplified. I think I wrote down on my notes somewhere on my phone a more simplified version. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Let's see. This is the D&D story. Status ailments. No, it does not say what your death is in here for some reason. Target also loses half their max base position, cannot exceed 3 halves. 3 halves. Target becomes cursed once the amount of cursing is equal to or exceeds this. Well, that's the cursing. Curses do automatically drop your HP down to half. And you could just force the player to only roll half of their, as if they were half of their level. And for the hollowing, again, just make it reduce by 1 until it's half. So we'll write that down as well here in just a minute. So first off, the hollowing DC. We're going to ignore the hollowing DC. Hollowing DC. And the reason why we're going to ignore the hollowing DC is for the simple fact that, so put ignore. Due to having humanity added into the game, sorry. Due to having humanity added into the game to remove hollowing effects. And then on top of that, we'll just write hollowing extra effect, or effects, because I think there's multiple in here. So you lose, let's see, to your base position, probably your... Because you got to think about the d6s too, right? So, obviously 5% of a d10, maybe just one. So to your base position, you would lose one every hollowing effect. But then your... or actually 2 would be better, because every time you level up you get 1 plus your con modifier at a minimum of 1. And no, that would still say 1. So you lose 1 base position, and 1 hit die of temp position. Every stack hollowing to a max of half, put position, half base and temp, half base position, and half hit dice. Oops, I put hit. Hit dice, rounded down. We'll put that in parentheses. Rounded down. And that's pretty good. And we'll go over some of the hollowing effects using the Dark Souls dice again. Just because it's fun. Go ahead and pull out our d20 here. We're playing with yesterday. Not sure if we'll need the d10, but we'll leave that out just in case. So let's look at the effect for a 7. So, Death's Kin. You are a member of the dead. You carry the burden of the grave with you, and it scares those who look upon you. Gain +1 whenever making a charisma intimidation check. So that would actually be a benefit. We'll roll again. This one's a 17. Mobility. Your focus is increasingly on your failing mind. Sorry. The loss of your senses and the gradual corrosion of self. Reduce any skill of your choice by -1. And it's actually pretty good since you can choose one of your dump stats that you don't use. I rolled a 17 again. I rolled a 17 again. That's a 1. Empty. There's nothing left of you to be consumed. You, whatever that means, are gone now. You are a mindless thing. You must create a new character. So on a natural 1, it outright completely kills your character. And here's the good thing. If you want, as a DM, when a player dies, let them recreate their character back at level 1. You know, just let them take their character and just revert their levels down to level 1 again. They start with all the same loot once again. They're missing all of their current loot they have, and make that hollow of that player something they can go kill. And when they kill them, they gain everything that that person had, even all their duplicate items. And the best part is you don't have to force the player to play the same class again. You can let them play another class, and you guys could still go get that loot. That introduces a side, somewhat boss fight that could happen. And so we'll write that down, just because it's not generally listed in the rules. So, natural 1 on hollow. Oh, and of course, you know, you can allow a player to reroll if they roll a 1. Only let them do that once if you want. It's up to you. You're the DM, right? So, natural 1 on hollow. Create an enemy that drops everything on death. So that's pretty much all that would imply, is that you have an enemy that drops everything on death now. And although you might be level 6 starting back at level 1, which sucks. However, if your character was holding on to 20,000 souls, that's enough to level up to at least level 5. So then you just need to get up to 14,000 again. And you could even sell your starting equipment to get a little bit of a head start, since now you have your starting equipment again. Oh, water. Alright. It's kind of funny that I rolled a natural one right in between the book. Anyways, conditions. Most of these are normal, like blinded, burning, charmed, deafened, exhaustion, frightened, grappled. Exhaustion's a weird thing with the Dark Souls RPG, because there should never really be a time that you need sleep, since it specifically states you don't need sleep as an unkindled. Look at this dude. Yeah, look at this dude. Incapacitated, invisible, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, restrained, stunned, surprised, and unconscious. And one thing I want to mention about poisoned is, and poison's a little stupid on 5e, it just makes you have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. However, I like the idea of actually taking damage. Now, that's, of course, a more Pathfinder thing, so you would just, as for somebody who likes playing Pathfinder, or if you want your poison to do damage in 5e, just make it so it deals damage, of course. So, poison condition deals damage. Actually, I think I might be wrong when I say poison in Pathfinder deals damage. Hold on. So I think poison's actually a condition you can get in Pathfinder, and it does pretty much the same thing. Let's see. It's not. So what if I Google Pathfinder poison? Oh yeah, that's right. So Pathfinder has an interesting system for poisons. Each poison actually does its own thing, and it's pretty cool. So you have, there's like a tree somewhere in here. I remember having to, yeah, here it is. So like, has different effects depending on the poisons, like 1d2 con damage, nauseated for 1 minute, and paralyzed for 2d4 rounds. You have a 1d2 strength damage, 1d2 con damage, a bunch of other stuff like that. So Pathfinder doesn't actually just strictly do damage on poison. It's got a bunch of different things depending on the poison. So it's kind of cool. But poison condition deals damage over time. What's that be real quick? I made it worse somehow. Over time. That's right. And let's look at the next thing. So this just talks about ways that you can be in poison through contact, ingesting it, inhaling it, or injury. Injury poison can be applied to weapons, ammunition, and traps, right? Contact is smeared on an object, remains potent until it's touched or washed off. Creature touches it, contacts exposed to their skin, suffering its effects. Madness is a really, really fun thing. And the way madness works, actually we'll get to it as we read through madness. So the world suffers under an endless curse. The sun is bloated, its red light scarcely illuminating the decaying citadels. Cathedrals and cities that once teemed with life, now those same places are infested with mindless corpses, with demons, with deformed creatures of dark magic. Period. The inevitability takes a toll on the mind, driving those who have seen too much or lived too long in such cursed places beyond sanity, going mad. In Dark Souls, the role-playing game, there are several situations in which a character might be struck by temporary madness, succumbing to delusions, or having their mental equilibrium unsettled. The GM can call for such a check after any situation they feel appropriate. A list of such circumstances might include Seeing your comrade come back from the dead beside a bonfire, encountering the hollowed version of an old friend or lover, so seeing yourself could cause a madness effect. Gazing into the abyss of the true darkness lurking behind the cathedral of the deep. Sorry, somebody texted me. Dying and being brought back from the beyond once more, and encountering a creature of ancient legend or terrifying power, which could be like Eldritch Devourer of Gods, perhaps. Whenever a GM deems an event might trigger a period of madness, a character must make a wisdom saving throw with a DC equal to 10 plus the number of previous episodes of the madness. So, the first time a character makes such a saving throw, their DC is 10. Should they fail that saving throw, the next time they make one, the DC is 11. When a player character fails, they roll on the short-term madness table. Every third time a character fails and succumbs to madness, they roll on the indefinite madness table that cannot be cured or removed. Now, short-term madness is simple. It can last an hour, it can last a day, it can last until a long rest. It can be really up to you and the player, or if you are the player, the GM and the player. Close enough. Anyways, so let's talk about madness. My favorite ailment in Elden Ring, because I just adore the madness stuff and its lore so much. So, with madness, temporary should be as it follows. Kind of just makes sense that certain things would cause temporary madness. So, and we'll even write that down. Temporary madness is as is. However, just gonna point to the next page and start up here. I'll even put madness part 2. And we'll even put the fancy word of indefinite instead of permanent. I like to say indefinite madness instead of every 3 minor madness effects afflicting you is every 3 deaths. So you just gain outright a permanent madness effect every death. So indefinite madness effect, oops, I put is, I'm going to put effects. Affects the players every 3rd death. And every death for the first time of a new level, or just the player's very first death, you could force them to do a short-term madness roll, and that's perfectly fine. And again, you know, these will disappear after a while. I should have grabbed that D10 because I actually needed it. Now, these madness effects use the percentile. This bruh. Shut up. So, in this case, I got a 84. So we come down to 84, which is right here. I lied, right here. The character is stunned. So that would mean nothing really if you had just died, since, well, unless you're in combat. Your friends are in combat, I should say. That would mean that for your turn, you are stunned. And although stunned is not a condition in Pathfinder, it is a condition in 5e, which is in my GM screen. So if we look at conditions, you have stunned, which is right here. A stunned creature is incapacitated, can't move, and can speak only faltering. Creature automatically fails strength and dexterity saving throws. Attack rolls against the creature have advantage. So in a combat scenario, you would be in trouble if you gain that effect. However, if you had just died, that would mean that for your next turn, you spend your turn being stunned. And then when it's your turn again, you can start heading towards your combat. And we'll look at another one. In this case, I just got 10. So we look at the first one. The character retreats into their mind and becomes paralyzed. The effect ends if the character takes any damage. So this would imply that if you had died and you rolled this, you're just stuck there until that combat ends and somebody comes over and snaps you out of it or smacks you out of it. And let's look at the indefinite madness here. So there's a lot more. In this case, I rolled a 31. This one, the character regards something, usually the source of madness, with intensive revulsion, barely able to look upon it without quenching. So whatever caused your madness effect would, in a roleplay scenario, cause this issue. Let's look at another one. 65, which is right here. The character is blinded 25% or deafened 75%. So then you would roll again. Are we blinded? In this case, I rolled a 47, so I would be deafened. So that sucks. And of course, if you like, you can allow the player to remove indefinite madness effects. Cursing also causes indefinite madness effects. And that's another thing we'll write down, is that indefinite madness effects are only indefinite until removed by someone, right? So another thing we can add to the madness table is that cursing also going to show you deafened. Also invokes definite madness. And then me personally, So one thing I thought of just off the top of my head is that you could have it removed by spending souls to level up, but you don't level up. So spend souls on a non-level level up to remove. You could introduce an item. And the reason why I bring this up is because some of these, just looking at these ones, character suffers extreme paranoia and permanently suffers a -1 charisma, -1 wisdom. Whenever the character takes damage, they must succeed a DC 15 wisdom saving throw or be affected as though they failed a saving throw against the confusion spell. Confusion effect lasts for 1 minute. That is 10 rounds in a combat. And with how many times you'll be taking damage, that's not a high DC, but, well, at least not for Pathfinder. 5e, that can get pretty bad DC. So, spending levels on that, or even talking to a specific NPC. And with that NPC, you know, you could offer them humanity or offer them souls or something that could reverse the effect of your permanent madness. Let's see here. Alright. I think that about covers the madness table. Traps are about normal. Traps do, you know, if you're not in a combat scenario, go after your base position. They do not go after your temporary position, as you don't do anything to take effect of them. I just turned it. This guy, amateur over here. Anyways, so traps pretty normal, you know. Traps at play, triggering, trap effects, detecting and disabling a trap, complex traps. You got your traps DCs and attack bonuses, damage severity per level. So at first and fourth level, so it does actually increase. So a setback's a 1d10, dangerous 4d10, deadly 4d10. At 5th through 10th, it's 2d10, 10d10, 10d10, 11 through 16, 2d10, 10d10, 18d10. At 17th to 20, it's 4d10, 18d10, and 24d10. That's a lot of damage. You quit making that face. You stop that. I got collapsing roof, mechanical traps, falling nets, fire-breathing statue magic traps. This one's actually interesting. So the DC is 15 to spot the pressure plate as a well and fainted scorch mark on the floor and walls. A spell or other effect that can sense the presence of magic, such as detect magic, reveals an aurora of evocation magic around the statue. The trap activates when more than 20 pounds of weight is placed on the pressure plate, causing the statue to release a 30-foot cone of fire. Each creature in the fire must make a DC 13 dexterity saving throw, taking 4d10 fire damage on a failed save, where half as much is successful. 4d10, that's basically equivalent to a 17 to 10th setback, or a dangerous or deadly first to fourth trap. So, and that makes sense with how low the DC is to spot it. Well, and again, you got to think 5e, so 15 is actually pretty decent of a level, or DC. Let's see, there's pits, there's poison needle mechanics, you've got poison darts, and then rolling spheres, which trapdoor in a pressure plate, search the floor. Investigation check reveals the variation motors still on the bench. The sphere requires all creatures present to roll initiative. The sphere rolls initiative with a +8 bonus on its turn. It moves 60 feet in a straight line. The sphere can move through creature spaces, and creatures can move through its space, treating it as difficult terrain. Whenever the sphere enters a creature's space on a creature, or a creature enters its space while it's rolling, that creature must succeed a DC 15 dexterity saving throw, or take 10d10 bludgeoning damage, or bludgeoning, I always put an N in there for no reason, bludgeoning damage, and be knocked prone. Stops when it hits a wall or a similar barrier. However, it does keep turning if the room is appropriate for it to turn. As an action, a creature within 5 feet of the sphere can attempt to slow it down with a DC 20 strength check. So if you had a +2 to strength, you'd have to roll an 18 minimum to succeed on that. On a successful, sphere speed is reduced to 15 feet, and if the sphere's speed drops to... Oh no, sorry, it's reduced by 15 feet, and it moves 60 feet, so you'd have to do that 4 times. And if the sphere's speed drops to 0, it stops moving and is no longer a threat. So that's interesting. Combat. This is pretty normal. Determine if it's a surprise, establish position and locations, determine initiative, take turns, begin the next round. So pretty normal stuff here. You've got being prone, bonus actions, breaking up your move, difficult terrain, flying movement, and initiative, which the one thing that's different about the Dark Souls RPG initiative is that creatures do not roll initiative, they have a DC, which means that in theory, anyone that has a initiative higher, has a higher DC than anyone who rolls a higher initiative than the monster's DC gets to go before them. And I think they're also maybe not considered surprised. I'm not entirely sure if they're considered surprised or not. Decides where all characters and monsters are located, given the adventurer's marching order or their state of play in the room. Other locations beyond figures out where the adversaries are, how far away they are, and the characters doing stuff. The GM determines whether anyone involved in combat encounter is surprised. So it would almost be fair to say that like normal enemies would be considered surprised if you roll higher than them. Some of the more tougher enemies would be considered aware, but going after you. Now I'm curious. That's a plus. That's a plus. Okay, parts. Do they roll temporary position? No, they just have position. Okay. I've got these little cards in here because what I was doing is I was turning these cards into the Pathfinder character sheets for these guys, but being that I'm going to be doing that on Google spreadsheet or specifically a Google slide for these guys, maybe it wouldn't really matter as much anymore. But let's see. Stop that. No yawning. Andrew, you stop yawning. You're making me yawn. Did I move a page without realizing it? I did. Ouch. Put my finger on the bottom of the page. Interacting with objects around you, moving around other creatures, moving between attacks, other activities on your attacks, reactions. Let's read this. This is important. Hollow lies slumped, staring at a wall, unaware of your approach. A demon lurks above, about to leap down. To prevent your escape, sorry. In those situations, one side of the battle gains surprise over the other. The GM determines who might be surprised if neither side tries to be stealthy. They automatically notice each other. Otherwise, the GM compares the dexterity stealth checks of anyone hiding with the passive wisdom perception score of each creature on the opposing side. Any creature or monster that doesn't notice a threat is surprised at the start of the encounter. If you're surprised, you can't move or take an action on your first turn of the combat. You can't take a reaction until that turn ends. Members of a group can't be surprised even if the other members aren't. So, it's kind of general knowledge then. So in some cases you could be surprised, in other cases the other people could be surprised. And it all kind of depends on how the GM builds it out. Let's see here. So using different speeds, your turn, creature size, you have tiny, you have small, you have medium, large, huge, gigantic. One thing that I want to know is weapon size, because some of the monsters in this game have weapons that are big enough to hit multiple people. So do they just simply hit multiple people, or how does that work? And I feel like that's something I'd have to do my own research on, but we'll figure that out as we go. Space is normal, squeezing into a smaller space is normal. Actions in combat, you have attacks, attack rolls, casting a spell, critical hits, dashing, disengage. If you take the disengage action, your movement doesn't provoke an attack of opportunity for the rest of your turn. Times. Dodge. What does dodging do? When you take the dodge action, you focus entirely on avoiding attacks. Until the start of your next turn, any attack roll made against you has disadvantage. If you can see the attacker, you make a I went cross-eyed because I've got the stand right in front of my face. Attack roll made against you has disadvantage if you can see the attacker and you make a dexterity saving throw with advantage. Why does that sound weird? You lose this benefit if you are incapacitated or if your speed drops below 0. Why does this sound weird right here? Let me try reading this again. Until the start of your next turn, any attack roll made against you has disadvantage if you can see the attacker. Oh, they have disadvantage if you can see them. I kept seeing a comma somewhere. This messed me up. You can make dexterity saving throws with advantage. But yeah, I've got the stand like right here. So when I'm trying to read that, my left eye is trying to read the words, and my right eye keeps going cross-eyed because of it. So I'm trying reading the right side's a lot easier than the left side. It's my stand, but that's another thing. I've got a new stand coming in, so it'll be a lot easier to not only the new camera, but the new stand will be a lot better when finishing up this, especially since we have 2 other books other than these, and then we'll have to be going over all the other things as well. So in this one, you've got the hiding, you've got making an attack action, you've got modifiers to rolling, readying an action, searching or using objects. Again, these are some basic rules. We can just go right past them. Ranged attacks, melee attacks, 2-weapon fighting, shoving a creature, parry. This one is interesting. Readying yourself to intercept and turn aside your opponent's blow into a vital part of your survival combat. You can use your reaction to increase your AC by +2 against 1 melee attack that would have hit you. And what's interesting about parry is, and we'll do so with dodging. I don't know if Pathfinder has a rule for dodging, but I feel like the easiest way to do dodging in Pathfinder is just to add your dexterity modifier to your AC again. But that's just me. I just work here. Anyone with a shield would use parry, and that would just use their shield bonus. So one mechanic that I want to try and implement with parry is the ability to do the Dark Souls parry. You know, the X gonna give it to you moment. Ability to Dark Souls parry. And the way you would explain this is probably if your opponent on the dice rolls a 10 or under, assuming they still don't hit your AC, could possibly be parried. And for bosses, that's about possible unless they roll like a 2. And at that point, the boss was asking for it, let's be honest. But a lot of the normal enemies, especially if your AC is decently high, that should allow you to do it. Now, we will go over this again in the future and how this would actually work. I think the parry is supposed to be an action. However, I think some weapons... Yeah, readying yourself to intercept and turn aside your opponent's blow is a vital part of surviving combat. So, yes, parrying would be an action. The ability to Dark Souls parry. So, as an action... Ready a parry. An enemy. AC bonus based on shield or weapon. Oops. Since, you know, you can't parry if you're using 2 long swords, for example. So, as bonus based on shield or weapon. That says AC, not as, sorry. And then we'll say, for now, I think I spelled opponent wrong, but that's wrong. That's fine. Opponent has to roll under 11 and miss attack. So it gives the enemy a 50% chance to be parried, assuming their attack bonus is not high enough to actually hit you. And since with every attack you make, your bonus falls off by 5, at least in Pathfinder, I'm not sure about 5e. Kind of forgot all of the rules for 5e on stuff, but it would make it a little bit easier to parry somebody. However, whenever you do a parry, it's basically readying an action. And so you would have to get hit once, get hit twice, get hit thrice, and then on that 4th attack where they have like a -15 to their attack bonus, let's say their attack bonus is only a +2, you just have to pray they roll a 10 or under to get that parry off. And I would have to say that player has to announce when they use parry. On a specific attack. And then what does parrying do? Getting parried, it's supposed to be a capital G. Oops. Oops. Getting parried allows for an attack at advantage. Advantage and a melee crit attack. So for people who have things like, although in normal Dark Souls daggers are the crit weapons that do high crit damage, in Pathfinder the scythe has like a 4 times critical. So if you had a scythe and you parried an attack, you could mollywop them with that and do a crit. I thought about trying to implement the critical increase on weapons from the Dark Souls game to the Pathfinder database on their weapons. And I think the easiest way to do it for 5e is, for the daggers that have a higher crit range, the standard is 130, the ones that have like 130, or I just said 130 twice, sorry. So the standard crit damage is 100 in Dark Souls. And some of the standard dagger has 130 crit damage. So what you could do is take that 130 crit and go, alright, well, I'll make it so 100 is, because 5e doesn't have crit ranges to my knowledge. And I think the book actually makes it so they get improved critical, so this might be a bad idea. Just make it so the dagger does more damage, so 4 times damage instead of double damage. Or I guess in this case it'd be 5 times, but... So, let's talk about crit damage right now, since we're on the subject. So, crit damage to game itself, game to RPG. So, you have 2 options when increasing, and you could also just not take this rule at all. Remember that. So, you could increase... crit range or damage. Stinky. How dare you call me stinky? I'll have you know I took a shower. So, crit damage, I should put from game to RPG instead of 2. From game to RPG is increased crit range or damage. And so you could base that taking a weapon and forcing it to always have a d20 crit range and a 2 times critical damage, and then taking the stats from Dark Souls and making the weapon even better. And in this case, we're going to go look at a class, because I think some of the classes get brutal critical. No, it's not brutal critical. I think the knight has what I'm looking for. Yeah, improved critical at level 4, and then it increases. So improved to critical. At 4th level, your weapon attacks score critical hits on a roll from 19 or 20. At 14th level, this improved gain, blah, 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 18, 19, 20, yeah. So in 5e, that's perfect. If you don't want to use the Dark Souls statistic crits. However, in the Pathfinder... Why is that so loud? That's not... we will take a break for a minute. I gotta go take care of something. Once I hit BRB. for I have things to attend to, and we'll come back later. Next time I'm streaming, it won't be the Dark Souls RPG stuff. We're going to be doing our 7 Days to Die world, which we are currently on night 7 with like 6 in-game minutes to spare. So by the time the players load in, I'm already going to be fighting the horde for a little bit. But that is where we will be. We'll just live stream us playing some 7 days. And then we'll pick this up sometime next week. As Sunday, we have D&D. So stay tuned for some more D&D stuff come Sunday. I'm going to go ahead and put my Dark Souls dice away. It's, we got some good progress. We're still in the core rules, unfortunately. Haven't gotten much farther than that, but we are making progress nonetheless. So I will see you guys